Have you ever realized the person you share a bed with is a monster? Only after the locks click from the outside, tonight's story dives into a Manhattan penthouse where a husband's dark obsession masks a deadly syndicate war. Stick around because the ultimate betrayal comes from blood. The heavy silk of the emerald Zuhair Murad gown pooled around Alice's ankles, a stark contrast to the cold white Calcutta marble of the master suite. She adjusted the delicate diamond drop earrings, a wedding anniversary gift from a husband she was slowly realizing she didn't know at all. In the floor-to-ceiling mirrors of their Tribeca penthouse, she didn't just see a beautiful 32-year-old woman preparing for the St. Jude Winter Gala at the Plaza Hotel. She saw a prized possession, a canary in a highly fortified, soundproofed coal mine. The heavy mahogany door clicked open. Dominic stepped into the room. Dominic Russo was a man who commanded the very air around him. Publicly, he was the ruthless CEO of Russo Holdings, a real estate empire that owned half the Manhattan skyline. Privately, he was something much darker. Over the past 3 years of their marriage, the veil had slowly slipped. Alice had noticed the heavily armed men masquerading as chauffeurs, the late-night encrypted phone calls in Sicilian, and the sudden unexplained disappearances of rival developers. Dominic's dark, fathomless eyes swept over her. He was already dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, but his tie was undone, draped loosely around his neck. He didn't look like a man preparing for a night of champagne and polite society small talk. His jaw was clenched tight, a muscle feathering near his temple. "You're not wearing that," he said. His voice was quiet, a low baritone that didn't ask but commanded. Alice turned to face him, her heart doing a familiar, painful flutter. It was a mix of the intoxicating attraction she had felt since the day they met at a Sotheby's auction, and the suffocating dread that had been building for months. "Dominic, we are expected in 20 minutes. The mayor is at our table. I am not changing." She lifted her chin, trying to project a bravery she didn't entirely feel. He closed the distance between them with predatory grace. When he stood before her, the faint scent of bergamot and something sharp gun oil, her mind supplied with a jolt of terror, wrapped around her. He reached out his calloused thumb, tracing the bare skin of her collarbone, resting dangerously close to her throat. "You misunderstand me, Alice," Dominic murmured, his eyes locking onto hers with a frightening intensity. "That dress isn't leaving this house, and neither are you." Alice knocked his hand away, a sudden surge of anger cutting through her fear. "I am not a prisoner, Dominic. You have dictated where I go, who I speak to, and which of my friends I'm allowed to see for the last 6 months. I am going to this charity event. If you want to play the brooding, controlling dictator, do it in an empty penthouse." She turned toward the door, grabbing her silver clutch from the velvet ottoman. She made it exactly 2 steps before the heavy steel deadbolts on the bedroom doors slammed shut with a resounding motorized clack. Alice froze. The penthouse was equipped with a state-of-the-art security system, one Dominic controlled from an app on his encrypted phone. She spun around. He was casually slipping the phone back into his tailored pocket. "Open the door," she demanded, her voice shaking. "No!" Dominic walked over to the reinforced glass windows, looking out over the glittering lights of the Hudson River. "Take the dress off, Alice. Put on something comfortable. We're going to be in here for a while." "Are you insane?" she screamed, the facade of the dutiful wife finally shattering. "Is it the neckline? Is it the slit? Are you so pathologically jealous that you're locking me inside our own bedroom because a politician might look at my legs?" Dominic turned back to her, and the coldness in his eyes made the breath catch in her throat. There was no jealousy there. There was only absolute, terrifying calculation. "I don't give a damn about the mayor looking at your legs." Dominic said softly. I give a damn about the 4 pounds of C4 plastic explosives currently wired to the ignition of our armored Maybach, sitting in the parking garage downstairs. The silence in the room became absolute. Alice dropped her clutch. The silver clasp hit the marble floor with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. "What?" she whispered, the colour draining from her face. "The Moretti family." Dominic stated his tone devoid of emotion, though his eyes betrayed a simmering, violent rage. Leo Moretti decided that the truce we signed last spring in Palermo is no longer profitable. They were waiting for us to get in the car for the gala. Alice's mind raced, trying to process the sheer horror of his words. But our security. Matteo sweeps the cars every hour. "Matteo is dead," Dominic said bluntly. "They found him in the utility closet of the sub-basement 10 minutes ago. His throat was cut." Tears sprang to Alice's eyes. Matteo had been her driver for 2 years. He had brought her coffee, talked to her about his little girl in Queens. A wave of nausea hit her, and she had to grip the edge of the vanity to steady herself. "Oh my God." "Sit down, Alice," Dominic ordered, stripping off his suit jacket and tossing it onto the bed. He walked over to the mahogany armoire, pressing his thumb to a hidden biometric scanner on the side. The heavy wood panelled back slid open, silently, revealing a hidden cache of matte black tactical weaponry. If the car was rigged, why are we locking down the house? Alice asked, her voice barely a squeak, as she watched her husband methodically load a magazine into a Glock 19. "Shouldn't we leave, call the police?" Dominic let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "The police. Alice, the police captain in this precinct, is on Moretti's payroll, and we aren't leaving because the bomb was just the backup plan. They knew we might catch it." He racked the slide of the pistol, the metallic clatter shattering the last of Alice's illusions about her life. "They are already in the building," Dominic said, walking toward her, his eyes scanning the room. "And they aren't here to negotiate." The moment Dominic finished his sentence, the power to the penthouse cut out. Plunged into sudden, suffocating darkness, Alice let out a sharp gasp. A second later, the backup generators kicked in, bathing the suite in the dim, eerie glow of red emergency lighting. Whirr! Heavy titanium-reinforced shutters began to descend over the floor-to-ceiling windows, sealing them off from the Manhattan skyline. The penthouse was transforming from a luxury home into a bunker. Dominic grabbed her arm, his grip bruising but grounding. "Stay behind me. We're moving to the safe room." "Wait!" Alice gasped, struggling to keep up with his long strides in her high heels. She kicked them off, leaving the thousands of dollars of designer footwear abandoned on the rug. "Dominic, wait. How did they know? How did they know exactly what time we were leaving and which car we were taking? Matteo never uses the Maybach for evening events. He usually preps the Escalade." Dominic stopped in the middle of the hallway. The red light cast harsh, demonic shadows across the sharp planes of his face. He looked at her, a profound sadness briefly breaking through his stoic mask. "Think about it, Alice," he said quietly. "Who changed the plans this morning? Who called and asked if he could ride with us to the gala tonight, specifically requesting the Maybach because he wanted to impress his new date?" Alice felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. The air in her lungs turned to ice. "No," she whispered, shaking her head frantically. No. Arthur wouldn't do that. He's my brother." Arthur owes $3 million to Leo Moretti's illicit sports books in Atlantic City. Dominic stated his voice devoid of pity. "He has been feeding them our itineraries for a month in exchange for his debt being erased. My men intercepted his burner phone signals yesterday. I didn't want to tell you until I had proof, to save you the pain. You're lying. Alice shoved his chest, tears streaming down her face. You're lying to isolate me. You always do this. Before Dominic could answer, a massive concussive boom reverberated through the floorboards. Dust rained down from the coffered ceiling. The blast didn't come from the garage, it came from the private elevator shaft in their foyer. They blew the elevator doors. Dominic snarled, grabbing her hand again. Move. Now. He pulled her down the long, art-lined corridor. Alice ran barefoot over the cold hardwood, her emerald gown catching on the corners of antique tables. The reality of the situation crashed over her. Her brother, her own flesh and blood, had sold her to a mafia hit squad. Had Arthur known she would be in the car? Or did he think Dominic would be alone? The betrayal was a physical ache in her chest, sharp and agonizing. Gunfire erupted from the front of the penthouse, the distinct deafening roar of automatic weapons tearing through drywall, priceless vases and glass. Dominic's personal guards, stationed in the outer quarters, were returning fire. The sound was deafening, a chaotic symphony of violence that made Alice scream, her hands flying to her ears. Dominic shoved her into his private study, slamming the heavy oak door shut and locking it. He moved swiftly behind his massive mahogany desk, pressing a sequence of buttons hidden underneath. A section of the built-in bookshelves popped forward and slid to the left, revealing a reinforced steel door. "Get in," he ordered, pulling the vault door open. "What about your men?" Alice cried, looking back at the wooden door of the study, which was already vibrating from the sound of heavy footsteps running down the hall. "They know what they're paid to do," Dominic said coldly. He pushed her into the small, brightly lit room, stepping in behind her, and sealing the heavy door, just as a spray of bullets shredded the oak door of the study. The safe room was stark. Monitors lined one wall showing various security feeds from around the penthouse. Alice stared at the screens in horror. Heavily armed men in tactical gear were sweeping through her home. She watched as one of Dominic's guards was gunned down in the kitchen, his body slumping against the white marble island where she had drank her coffee that very morning. Alice collapsed onto a small metal bench, wrapping her arms around her knees. Her beautiful gown was torn and stained with dust. "They're going to kill us," she sobbed. "They're going to break in here and kill us." Dominic walked over to her, kneeling, so he was at eye level. He dropped the gun to his side and reached out gently, wiping a tear from her cheek. His touch was tender, a jarring contradiction to the violence raging just feet away from them. "Nobody is going to touch you, Alice," he said, his voice a fierce, possessive vow. "I am Dominic Russo. I built this city, and I built this cage. I told you that dress wasn't leaving the house, and neither are you. But they aren't leaving alive, either." He stood up and walked to a secondary panel on the wall. "The Morettis think they have me trapped. They think this room is a dead end." He punched a code into the keypad. The floor beneath them gave a slight shudder. Alice looked up, bewildered. "What are you doing? This building was built in 1920. Dominic smirked, a dangerous, feral expression. "It used to be a bootlegging warehouse. There's a decommissioned freight elevator shaft behind this wall that drops straight down into the subway maintenance tunnels. We're leaving." "But you just said—" "I said we aren't leaving the house," Dominic corrected, hitting a heavy red button on the wall. On the security monitors, Alice watched as the feeds in the main penthouse suddenly flickered. "I never said the house was going to stay standing." "Dominic, what did you do?" "I triggered the fail-safe," he said, grabbing a tactical flashlight from a shelf and handing it to her. The back wall of the safe room began to grind open, revealing a dark, musty concrete shaft. The C4 in the Maybach downstairs. It's connected to the penthouse's gas lines. In exactly 3 minutes, Leo Moretti's hit squad is going to be vaporized. Alice stared at him, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his ruthlessness. He had rigged their own home as a bomb. He was willing to destroy everything they owned, kill a dozen men, just to ensure her survival and his control. "Come on," Dominic commanded, stepping into the dark shaft and holding his hand out to her. Alice looked at his outstretched hand. It was the hand of a killer, a mob boss, a monster. But as the sound of a cutting torch began to hiss against the steel door of the safe room, she realized it was also the only hand that could keep her alive. She took it, stepping into the darkness, leaving her old life behind to burn. The descent was a grueling exercise in terror and sensory deprivation. The iron ladder was slick with decades of condensation and rust chilling Alice's bare feet and tearing at the delicate skin of her hands. Above them, the heavy steel door of the safe room clicked shut, sealing them inside the claustrophobic vertical tomb. Dominic moved with practiced, terrifying efficiency. Below her, his flashlight cutting through the gloom, guiding her footing. "Don't look down, Alice. Keep your eyes on my shoulders," he commanded, his voice echoing flatly against the concrete. She focused on the broad expanse of his charcoal suit jacket, now covered in dust. Every muscle in her body trembled. The reality of what she was leaving behind, her home, her safety, her entire understanding of her family, gnawed at her sanity. Then the world ended. The explosion didn't sound like it did in the movies. It was a physical force, a concussive shockwave that punched the air straight out of Alice's lungs. The sound was a deafening bass-heavy roar that vibrated through the iron rungs, shaking her so violently she nearly slipped into the abyss. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling far above, coating her face and hair. Dominic's hand shot up in the dark, gripping her ankle tight enough to bruise, steadying her. "Hold on. It's just the structural backdraft." Above them, the $72 million Tribeca penthouse, the symbol of the Russo Empire, was incinerated, taking Leo Moretti's elite hit squad with it. Alice clung to the ladder, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her face, mourning not the material loss, but the final violent death of her innocence. 10 agonizing minutes later, Dominic's boots hit solid ground. He caught Alice by the waist, swinging her down onto the damp gravel of a cavernous arched tunnel. The air here smelled of ozone-stagnant water and ancient brick. They were in the decommissioned depths of the New York City transit system, far below the bustling streets of Manhattan. "Move," Dominic urged, pulling a burner phone from his pocket. He didn't dial a number. He simply pressed a single digit and waited for 3 seconds before hanging up. A beacon signal. They navigated the dark labyrinth of the maintenance tunnels. The emerald Zuhair Murad gown, once a beacon of high society glamour, was now a shredded, soot-stained rag, dragging through puddles of unknown grime. Alice shivered violently, the adrenaline crash beginning to set in. Dominic noticed. He stopped, shrugging off his suit jacket, and wrapped it tightly around her bare shoulders. His knuckles brushed her cheek, lingering for a fraction of a second. "We're almost out." They rounded a curve in the tunnel, emerging into the sprawling graffiti-covered ruins of the abandoned City Hall subway station. The ornate skylights far above let in bleeding streaks of ambient city light. Parked squarely on the rusted tracks were 2 black armored Cadillac Escalades, their engines purring quietly. Standing in front of them was Vincenzo Dominic's ruthless underboss, a giant of a man with a scarred jawline and dead shark-like eyes. Vincenzo was flanked by 6 heavily armed men in tactical gear. "Boss." Vincenzo nodded, his voice a gravelly rumble. He glanced at Alice, offering a curt, respectful dip of his head. "The secondary perimeter is secure. The fire department is currently dealing with the gas leak at the penthouse. NYPD is cordoning off the block. Carter casualties. Dominic asked, his tone shifting from protective husband back to the cold, calculating syndicate head. Vincenzo handed Dominic a suppressed Sig Sauer to replace his Glock. 5 of ours in the penthouse. All of Moretti's men are ashes. However, we secured the priority package. Alice watched, bewildered, as Dominic's jaw tightened. Where? Trunk of the second vehicle, Vincenzo replied. Dominic turned to Alice, his expression unreadable. Get in the first car. Turn the heat on. Dominic, what is the priority package? Alice asked, her voice cracking. He didn't answer. He just gestured for Vincenzo's men to open the rear doors of the second Escalade. A figure was dragged out onto the damp concrete. He was bound at the wrists with heavy zip ties, a burlap sack cinched over his head. He was thrashing wildly, his muffled screams echoing off the Guastavino tile arches of the abandoned station. One of Vincenzo's men forced him to his knees, ripping the sack off his head. Alice let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. It was Arthur. Her older brother's face was bruised, a nasty cut bleeding over his left eye. He looked pathetic, terrified and small in his expensive tuxedo. The tuxedo he had planned to wear to the St. Jude gala. The gala he had used as bait to get her killed. Alice. Arthur sobbed, his eyes locking onto her. Alice, thank God. Tell these animals to let me go, Dominic. What the hell is this? Dominic didn't say a word. He walked slowly toward his brother-in-law, his boots crunching on the gravel. The heavy silence of the underground station amplified the sheer menace radiating from him. Arthur, Dominic said softly, stopping just inches from the kneeling man. Do you know what time it is? Arthur blinked, terrified snot running down his upper lip. What I don't. It's 9:45 p.m., Dominic stated calmly. Right now, Alice and I were supposed to be sitting at table 4 at the plaza. And right now, Leo Moretti's men were supposed to be peeling my skin off in an abandoned warehouse in Queens, while they held a gun to your sister's head to make me sign over the Brooklyn waterfront deeds. Arthur went pale, violently shaking his head. No, Dominic. I swear to God, I don't know what you're talking about. Dominic sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. He looked back at Vincenzo. The ledger. Vincenzo stepped forward, pulling a folded manifest from his tactical vest. He handed it to Dominic. You see, Arthur, you're a terrible gambler, but you're an even worse criminal, Dominic said, unfolding the paper. He turned to face Alice, ensuring she heard every word. I told you Arthur owed $3 million. What I didn't tell you, Alice was the collateral he offered Moretti when he couldn't pay. Dominic tossed the paper onto the ground in front of Arthur. The betrayal blueprint. The debt, $3.2 million, accrued over 6 months at Moretti-backed illicit casinos. The collateral, the security codes to the Tribeca penthouse, and the encrypted GPS frequency of the armored Maybach. The bonus, a $500,000 wire transfer to a Cayman Island shell company under Arthur's name, paid out upon the confirmed assassination of Dominic Russo. He didn't just sell me out, Alice, Dominic said, his dark eyes fixed on her pale face. He sold you out. He knew you would be in the car. He factored you in as acceptable collateral damage. That's a lie, Arthur shrieked, struggling against the zip ties. Alice, listen to me. He's a monster. I did it to get you out. I was trying to save you from him. He's suffocating you. Alice stepped forward. The cold air of the subway tunnel bit into her bare legs, but she didn't feel it. She felt completely hollowed out. She looked at her brother, the boy who had taught her how to ride a bicycle, the young man who had walked her down the aisle when their father died, the man who had willingly traded her life to cover his gambling debts. You asked to ride in the Maybach this morning, Arthur. Alice said, her voice eerily calm, devoid of the hysteria that had gripped her in the penthouse. "You specifically asked to ride with us." Arthur swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically. I changed my mind. I was going to take an Uber. I couldn't risk. You were making sure we were in it," Alice finished for him. The final piece of the puzzle slid into place. The truth was ugly, brutal, and undeniable. Dominic stepped back, offering Alice the suppressed Sig Sauer. The underground station went deathly quiet. Vincenzo's men didn't move a muscle. Arthur stopped breathing. "In my world, Alice blood betrayal has only one price," Dominic said quietly. "But he is your blood, not mine. You have accused me of controlling your life, of keeping you in a cage. Tonight the cage is gone. The choice is yours." Alice stared at the heavy black weapon in her husband's palm. It represented a threshold. On one side was the woman she used to be, a naive socialite wife who turned a blind eye to the shadows to enjoy the sunlight. On the other side was the reality of the Russo family, a world built on violence, absolute loyalty, and ruthless survival. "Alice, please," Arthur begged, his voice breaking into a high-pitched whine. "I'm your brother. You can't let him do this. You're a good person." Alice slowly reached out. Her manicured fingers wrapped around the textured grip of the gun. It was heavy. It felt like cold, hard truth. She looked down at Arthur. She didn't see her brother anymore. She saw a liability, a traitor who would sell her again the moment his pockets were empty. "You're right, Arthur," Alice said softly, her eyes hardening into something resembling Dominic's own unyielding steel. "I am a good person, but I'm also a Russo now." She didn't raise the gun. Instead, she flipped it around and handed it back to Dominic. She looked her husband dead in the eyes. There was no fear left in her. The canary had died in the fire. A hawk had emerged from the ashes. "Do what needs to be done," Alice ordered her husband, her voice ringing clear and authoritative through the damp tunnels. "And then take me home. We have a war to plan." Dominic's lips curved into a dark, genuinely awe-struck smile. The obsession he had harbored for her mutated in that single moment into profound, dangerous respect. She wasn't just a prized possession anymore. She was his queen. "With pleasure, mia regina," Dominic murmured. Alice turned her back on her brother. She walked toward the first escalade, wrapping Dominic's suit jacket tighter around her shoulders, the ruined Zuhair Murad dress trailing behind her like the ghost of a dead life. She opened the heavy armored passenger door and climbed inside, shutting it with a solid, definitive thud. Outside in the dark, a single muffled shot echoed off the subway tiles. Alice didn't flinch. She just stared straight ahead into the darkness, ready to build a new empire. If this deep dive into the treacherous, blood-soaked world of the Manhattan Mafia kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories. The underworld never sleeps, and loyalty is the most expensive currency of all. Drop a comment below. Would you have made the same choice Alice did, or would you have pulled the trigger yourself? Share this video with your fellow true crime and drama lovers, and stay tuned for our next story.